CNBC TV 18, celebrating 16 years of business leadership.
Years ago, we went on air for the very first time, and after 5,845 whole days, we still remain the numero uno in the world of business news in India. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us on India Business Hour. I am Kritika Saxena, and with me is Ronojoy Banerjee from New Delhi. Ron, happy CNBC's birthday to you.
Thanks so much, Kritika. Same to you. Indeed, a very proud moment for us as an organization to be the #1 position for the last 16 years. And in fact, as we celebrate 16 years of our undisputed leadership, we wish to thank each and every one of you who've been a part of our journey. And without further ado, let's quickly take a look at all that made headlines through this day.
More you exempt, the higher the rates have to be. That's it, and that's something that the political process will have to recognize very, very clearly. There is no free lunch.
The chief economic advisor says that the rates proposed by his panel are realistic, but cautions higher exemptions will mean a higher rate. Allays concerns of inflationary impact, also clarifies that his panel has merely codified existing demerit rates and not called for a higher tax.
Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi may have to appear in a trial court tomorrow. This after the Delhi High Court turns down their plea, challenging summons issued against them in the National Herald case.
I'm getting quite optimistic about the Indian market for one simple reason. I think there's enough green shoots emerging.
Auto companies will do well, the cement companies will do well. So a lot of companies will, benefit from a better GST rate.
Optimism about 2016 remains intact even as Dalal Street tumbles for the 4th straight day, but many say their hopes hinge on the passage of the GST.
Conditions are ripe for the Fed to hike rates, says Dennis Lockhart, the president of Atlanta Fed and a voting member of the FOMC. Wall Street opens flat.
Whistleblowers Act, which was passed earlier, did not address to these safeguards.
Instead of affording them protection, protection is being offered to ministers and bureaucrats.
War of words in the Rajya Sabha as opposition parties accuse the government of diluting the Whistleblowers Protection Bill. Government refuses to send the amendments to a select committee.
Should the powers of the Rajya Sabha be curtailed, BJD MP J Panda speaks out after 6 MPs have moved a privilege motion against him after he called for clipping the wings of the upper house.
Chennai fight back after floods ravaged the city a week ago. Airport resumes commercial operations. Most train services also restored.
They have to deal with it. And we all have to work together with them because, like I said, it's not like finger pointing or it's like them versus us.
Don't blame China alone for climate change, says former California governor and Hollywood star Arnold Schwarzenegger. The talks in Paris enter the final lap. Well, let's head straight to the action from the Lal Street today, where markets tumbled for the 4th straight session. The day started off well with a gap up open, but all the gains were wiped out by midday, and the Nifty ended the day with marginal losses, stopping at the 77.65 mark. The cuts were a little deeper on the Sensex as the Sensex lost about 100 points by the end of the day. So sharp cut there. You can see that graph going down, and hopefully tomorrow should be a better day. But the bears may have taken charge, but top market experts are hopeful about the year 2016. We had a whole host of experts through the day, and here are the big bets for the new year.
Actually, I'm getting quite optimistic about the Indian market for one simple reason. I think there's enough green shoots emerging. I think, 3 months back there were a few green shoots. Now there are a lot more green shoots, whether it is, the auto market or the commercial vehicle market or, road orders or even some consumer, urban consumption sectors. We're seeing it in some of the airline data. A lot of areas where you're seeing. Actually, one of the biggest surprises to me has been oil demand growth. India's oil demand growth in September was 16%, in October was 18%. Those are all very bullish signs about an economy that is very much on the mend.
I think, the auto companies will do well, the cement companies will do well. So a lot of companies will, benefit from a better GST rate, if you will. It's a fairly significant change that will take place in India. So my sense is that, whether it's that, it's always incremental reform. It's not one thing that will cure all things in India. If we remain bullish on airline stocks, broadcasting is showing some new life. You look at all the stocks, they are churning well. So I think there are enough themes for investors.
We would have pushed our reform and GST forward in the budget. But I think not having that session working cost us very dearly. And if you realize the market peaked out just around then, and it's really been a downhill ride since then. So moving on to 2016, we are back almost where we were when the year started. We're looking forward to this session of Parliament again. Hopefully the budget session starts seeing the income tax and corporate rate tax cuts which were promised. Domestic inflows continue. The foreigners who had to withdraw money because of the Fed hiking rates, all that would have hopefully been behind us. And therefore, most of the gains in some sense from this mood of pessimism we are currently in could be front-loaded in again the first half of the year next year.
Now let's move over to some other news over which the market participants will be watching very closely. Remember, Fed will be meeting on the 16th of December, and many believe that a Fed rate hike may well and truly be around the corner. Economic conditions are satisfactory and markets well prepared for a rate hike by the Federal Reserve when they meet next week. That is the word coming in from the Atlanta Fed President and FOMC voting member Dennis Lockhart. Speaking to CNBC, Lockhart said he expects to see a gradual rise in the rates once the initial hike happens. Listen in.
I personally am ready. I think the conditions are satisfactory. I think the market is well prepared. The economy is on a solid, moderate path. Yes, we downgraded our forecast a little bit for 2016, and we're growing. The economy is growing closer to a 2% world than a 3% world at the moment. But I think, nonetheless, the conditions are really satisfactory for making a move.
Well, hopes of a possible rate hike next week hasn't done much to bring relief to Wall Street. So U.S. equities opening fairly in the red with some sharp cuts there. So the Dow down by about 0.8%, the S&P 500 down by, again, 0.8%, and the Nasdaq also down by about 0.7%. And that's also despite a very positive U.S. jobs data coming in now. But moving on, the OPEC's decision to hold on to key production levels has led to a sharp weakening in the crude prices, with the NYMEX slipping back below the $40 a barrel mark, and the Brent also trading under pressure at that $41 per barrel mark. It was staying close to that $42 per barrel mark, but then again there have been some sharp cuts in the last couple of hours alone. European equities, meanwhile, are trading slightly higher, as I said, after a solid jobs report from the US, which put the Federal Reserve on course to increase interest rates. So the German DAX currently up by about 1.5%, the French CAC up by about 0.9%. The British FTSE has tempered down a bit, so flattish, down by about 0.1%. Ron?
Well, now let's just shift focus now to India, and where, of course, the big CNBC TV 18 exclusive of the day His panel's report on the GST revenue neutral rate has definitely brought a smile on the face of many, with the standard rate being pegged at 17 to 18%. And while his recommendations on abolishing the proposed 1% manufacturing tax, he says, was to promote the Make in India campaign. It's the demerit list that's got certain sectors worried. Shireen Bhan caught up with the Chief Economic Advisor Arvind Subramaniam and started off by asking him on exactly these issues that I talked about. Listen in.
On tobacco products, the situation is that, tobacco products will be part of the GST structure, but the centre will be able to levy top-up excises over and above the GST.
Mm-hmm. So that means 40% plus then?
Yeah, whatever it is, no, again, that's a call they have to make. So if, for example, the centre has to tax more, the broad aim would be that it wouldn't be much greater than what it is today. So tobacco goes into the structure of the GST, maybe at a standard rate or whatever, and then anything over and above that the centre can do as part of the top-up. So I mean, the point is that, no increases in tax rates per se are envisaged. If anything, as you said, manufacturing tax rates are going to come down substantially as a result of this, because the standard rate is going to come
lower.
It's
yeah.
lower, exactly.
Yeah.
It's going to be lower.
So you're saying it's essentially status quo then, as far as things like cigarettes are concerned, because I mean the markets are reacting negatively, trying to understand the demerit rate.
We've not recommended anything at all to suggest, increases in any of these rates. We're just codifying what the status quo is.
Okay. Let me come to the other controversial aspect, and of course your recommendation is aligned to the Congress Party, and you have suggested that the 1% interstate tax is done away with. And, just about everybody agrees with that because of the inflationary impact. But do you believe that it is going to be, and the cascading impact, and do you believe that it's going to be easy to get for instance, the states of Tamil Nadu and Gujarat on board? Gujarat, I would imagine, is easy, but Tamil Nadu on board, by doing away with it?
I want to say that the main reason to eliminate that is, in fact, to realize the Make in India vision. As we say in the report that, you want to make in India by making one India. Because, what these things actually do is to favor production overseas relative to production in India. And why would we want to do that, and why would we want to do that? We're not doing that by raising our barriers to overseas, but here we're in fact subsidizing overseas production, and that's what we want to eliminate.
Well, we'll get you more from that interview in just a bit, but let's talk about the action from the Parliament. The Prime Minister may be leading from the front, trying to break that deadlock in Parliament and getting the opposition on board, but it's obviously easier said than done in Indian politics. The Congress, on its part, is in no mood to play along and is back in a huddle, trying to draw up a strategy on their future course of action. The party Vice President, Rahul Gandhi, also led a protest march outside the Parliament today, demanding that Union Minister V.K. Singh be removed for his insensitive statement on Dalits. And staying with Parliament action, the government has refused to send the proposed amendments to the Whistleblowers Protection Bill to a select committee. The bill has been passed by the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha today, which saw a war of words with opposition accusing the centre of trying to dilute the act, which basically safeguards whistleblowers as a whole.
Whistleblowers Act, which was passed earlier, did not address to these safeguards which had to be excluded from the purview of the bill. And therefore, these safeguards have been included, and by and large, these are the same ones which are already existing there in the RTI Act.
Whistleblowers have had to lose both life and limb because they attempted to drag the country back to the path of integrity and honesty. And instead of assisting them to do so better, instead of affording them protection is being offered to ministers and bureaucrats.
I wrote to Finance Minister, previous government, again and again, on a dubious deal by a particular private sector insurance company, who are faking the name of insurance beneficiaries of crop, weather insurance and crop insurance, and took the money from the state government on account of the premium on their account. A whistleblower has opened the lid of that private insurance company, got immediately sacked.
While the acrimony continues between the government and a united opposition, it seems, the Parliament, however, did manage to get some business done today. The Negotiable Instruments Amendment Bill was passed. What does it mean? Well, cases of cheque bounces can be filed at the place where a cheque is presented for clearance and not the place of issue. The Rajya Sabha cleared the bill without any discussion. But the big developing political story, of course, was Sonia and Rahul Gandhi are moving the Supreme Court, challenging the trial court's summons in the National Herald case. This comes hours after the Delhi High Court dismissed their plea, challenging the summons. The Gandhis are expected to seek a stay from appearing before the trial court tomorrow. Remember, BJP leader Subramaniam Swamy has accused Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi and 4 other Congress leaders of cheating and breach of trust in the acquisition of Associate Journals Limited. Pallavi Ghosh now, senior editor in CNN IBN, joins us with all the details. Pallavi, what more can you tell us? What do we expect from Congress tomorrow?
The trial court judgment certainly has come as a huge setback to the Congress party and particularly to the Gandhis. The Congress, of course, has gone into a huddle and they're planning to appeal. What they're telling us is that they get a copy of the judgment very late in the evening, and therefore the only time span in which they have that they can apply for an appeal is only tomorrow once court reconvenes at around 10 o'clock. That's, of course, going to be a huge setback. But what will be interesting to watch is that will this have an impact on the Congress's strategy as far as Parliament is concerned. Already Congress spokespersons are accusing the government and they're already talking of political vendetta. Will this have an impact on key bills like the passage of the GST? Will this also have an impact on the Congress's otherwise aggressive strategy inside Parliament? That, of course, remains to be seen. But for now, the Congress, of course, is saying that they have nothing to hide, nothing to fear, and therefore they're going to go in for an appeal.
All right, Pallavi, thanks for joining in with that. Clearly, the deadlock between the Congress and the BJP is still continuing there. But the other big story that we are tracking for you today, BJD MP Jay Panda faces the ire of the Rajya Sabha MPs for his article which is an article written by him for a national daily. Panda, who represents the Kendra Party constituency of Odisha, had made a case for reducing the power of the upper house, that is the Rajya Sabha, in that very article. The views expressed by Panda, according to the complaints, constituted a breach of privilege and a contempt of the House. 6 Rajya Sabha MPs, which includes Mohsina Kidwai of the Congress, KC Tyagi of the JDU, Naresh Agrawal of the Samajwadi Party and TK Rangarajan of the CPM, D. Rajan of the CPI and Derek O'Brien of the Trinamool Congress, moved a notice alleging a breach of privilege and a contempt of the Rajya Sabha against them. Shireen Bhan, in fact, caught up with Jay Panda a short while ago. Listen in to a slice of that conversation.
Well, joining us now is the man himself, Jay Panda. Jay, I appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. So as I mentioned, a privilege notice has been issued against you by Mohsina Kidwai of the Congress Party, KC Tyagi of the JDU, Naresh Agarwal of the SP, TK Rangarajan of the CPIM, D. Raja and Derek O'Brien of the Trinamool Congress. Are you surprised by the reaction that parliamentarians have had on the back of what you've said? It mirrors what the finance minister has been saying for very long now, calling it the tyranny of the unelected. But are you surprised by the reaction in Parliament?
Well, after the finance minister raised this issue back in August, in October, the Italian Senate also passed constitutional amendments along the same lines, and that was the peg for me to write this article, because other countries have gone ahead and made similar changes so that there is no deadlock between their 2 houses. And so I was a bit surprised, because what I have written about is right about the examples of what the UK did in changing the powers of its House of Lords, and then the Italian Senate example as well as the US example. And I was taken aback that just for voicing my opinion that we should have a similar debate in India, some of the Rajya Sabha MPs have filed this privilege motion. You know, it's in particular, many of these Rajya Sabha MPs have been speaking about intolerance in this country, and I'm puzzled that they can't even tolerate an opinion in a newspaper.
Well, I don't want to even get into the tolerant versus intolerance debate, Jay, but let me ask you another question now, and playing devil's advocate, because, you know, this would be the point of view of, for instance, the Congress party, who would ask you that why didn't you raise this issue when the BJP was stalling Parliament? Why didn't you raise this issue when the BJP blocked things like the insurance bill, the goods and services bill, and so on and so forth? That would be the Congress's argument. Why do it now?
But Shireen, I have been raising this. I have been writing about this issue for many years now, even when the UPA was in government. And in fact, let me remind you, I have raised it a couple of times on your show, on this channel itself. So I cannot be accused of favoring this government or that government. Anybody can Google and read my articles. But, you know, it's not just the powers of the Rajya Sabha that have to be amended to break the deadlock. Also, there must be changes brought about in parliamentary rules which affect the opposition. For example, to use the UK example, we must set aside certain days of the week where opposition's agenda must be discussed in Parliament. It can't be only about getting government bill through, but also to put the government, to make the government face up to the questions that the opposition wants to raise.
That's a very valid point that you make, Jay, and I remember, you know, the discussions that we've had, as you pointed out, on CNBC TV 18 on these issues. But again, to play devil's advocate, you know, how do you ensure then that there are enough checks and balances in the system? And I'll ask you this in the context of just one particular bill, and that is the land bill, which the government tried to bulldoze through Parliament. When it failed, it then adopted the ordinance route till finally it realized that it was going to be a political misadventure and decided to withdraw the ordinance itself. So how do you ensure that there are enough checks and balances in place, that legislation that needs to be sort of thoroughly vetted doesn't go through without proper vetting?
You have raised a very good point, and in fact, in the article that I wrote, I have very, very clearly pointed out that there must be checks and balances. I am not advocating for doing away with the Rajya Sabha. I do want the Rajya Sabha to continue to have that role of checks and balances, but we must recognize that around the world, other democracies are all changing. The rules under which we operate are from 19th century England. Now, England itself has changed its rules, so has Italy, so has America, and now Australia and Canada are debating it. So let's answer your question in two ways. One is, if the Rajya Sabha continues to be indirectly elected, it should have the ability to slow down a bill for 1 year, just like House of Lords does. And in the process of slowing it down, you can build enough public opinion that the government would back off from bulldozing a wrong bill. Otherwise, the other option is you could do what the US did with its Senate in 1913. It changed the rules, so the US Senate does have a veto, but it is directly elected so that it is more publicly aligned with the public mood. So either way would be enough checks and balances, but you can't have a complete blockage, a complete gridlock of no important legislation happening.
No, I absolutely agree with you, Jay, but given the political mood at this point in time, and given the fact that just a mere article that you've written has elicited this sort of a response, do you see this going anywhere, whether inside Parliament or within political parties and the political discourse?
Well, apart from these 6 Rajya Sabha MPs who have filed the privilege motion, there are a couple of others who seem to be unhappy about this, but there are many, many Rajya Sabha MPs, including from opposition parties like the Congress and other parties, who have come and privately told me that there should not be a privilege motion on an opinion. Now, regarding taking forward this idea of parliamentary reform so that we don't have logjam, you know, in that article I've written, the final closing line I have said is that opposition parties must consider this seriously, because if they hope to come back to government, then they will be going through the same rigmarole and not be able to govern India at all. And there is a point at which the people of India will just, lose their patience. So I think we should do it in the larger interest and not just about who is in government at what time and who is in opposition.
That was Jay Panda, combative as ever in conversation with our managing editor Shireen Bhantu. I'm not sure whether Rajya Sabha members can be really called unelected. Perhaps the more apt term might be indirectly elected, but that's for others to decide. Moving on to the big national story over the last fortnight, Chennai is slowly limping back to normalcy, and in a major relief for the residents, the Met Department has forecasted dry and cloudy weather today. However, slight rains have been predicted in southern and the interior parts. Jude Sanith, who's been bringing us all the latest updates from the city over the last many days, joins us. Jude, how are things looking up now?
Well, you can see me smiling, and that's because it's one of the first few dry days that Chennai has experienced in the last 1 week or so. A week that has seen one of the worst floods to hit the city in the last 100 years. Now, just to give you some perspective as to where we're joining you from, in the background you can see the MGR Memorial. We're of course coming to you from the city's iconic Marina Beach. And a little to my left, you can clearly see how traffic in the city has well and truly returned to normalcy. Vehicles flying down the road, no waterlogging at all. And you've probably also observed by now that power is back as far as this locality is concerned. We're told that close to 85 to 90% of Chennai's localities have power restored to them. So it's been a slow limp back to normalcy, but the city certainly is getting there. We are also in a position to confirm to you that several companies have now joined the race to provide relief as far as the Chennai floods are concerned. BharatMatrimony.com, for instance, has started a portal called ChennaiNeedsHelp.org, where the company is attempting to tabulate help that's needed, relief that's needed, people who need help, people who are in a position to provide help, so as to streamline the process of relief. Sangam Cinemas, which is another big multiplex brand as far as Chennai is concerned, has also stepped up provision of relief on a war footing. Even SPI Cinemas, another well-known multiplex outlet as far as Chennai is concerned, has also started mass cooking at some of its F&B joints and kitchens, so as to enable easy provision of food as far as relief is concerned. Polaris Intellect, which is of course a Polaris company, has also teamed up with close to 150 NGOs to supply as many as 5 lakh blankets. So, India Inc. in Chennai certainly up to speed as far as relief is concerned.
Well, Jude, we've seen you smiling after 10 whole days, so thanks for bringing us much needed good news. But as Jude was saying, Chennai is crawling back to normalcy. Big corporate houses are finally now being able to take stock of the impact of that massive flooding that threw the city completely out of gear last week. So Indian Oil Corporation, whose subsidiary, that is Chennai Petroleum Corporation's refinery, is still underwater, has decided to deviate supply from other states to help aid all the relief work. IOC's chairman B. Ashok spoke to us earlier today. He said that they are trying to do all they can for now to ensure that supply is not disrupted.
Chennai supplies have certainly improved, though our terminals as well as the refinery had some problems in terms of flooding of water and all that. We have already started supplying for the last 3 days from our main terminals in Korukupet in Chennai as well as in Ennur terminal. We are also moving products from other parts of Tamil Nadu as well as from the neighboring states, including Bangalore as well as from Andhra. So we think that the supply situation is quite normal. Chennai Petroleum has also been underwater, and from considering the safety aspect, the refinery was shut down, but that has not affected supplies. There is enough product available in Chennai refinery.
Now, another company that has a massive presence in the state is Ashok Leyland. The automotive giant has now announced that it has restarted regular operations as its original manufacturing unit after being shut for a week in the wake of the massive floods in the state. The company says it's only going to be able to assess its insurance losses going forward. Moving on, the Fair Trade Regulator is looking at 5 cases of alleged abuse of dominant position by online cab companies. Speaking to CNBC TV 18's Purnima Murli at an event in Bengaluru, CCI Chairman Ashok Chawla says that investigation is still underway. He also commented on DLF's plan to sell DT Cinemas to PVR Group. That is something that we had reported right here on CNBC TV 18. On the matter of the search engine Google's alleged anti-competitive practices, Ashok Chawla says that it is going to take quite some time before there is any finality on that matter.
Some of the cab aggregators are pricing their products much below their cost with the idea of harming the competition. We at some places are getting the matter investigated. The investigation has to first establish that the cab company is dominant. Only if it is dominant, then the question of abuse or the question of predatory pricing arises. The information has just been put in the public domain. The objective is that in this process we get a feedback from what the people believe is acceptable and what is causing concern to them, if any. And that helps us in taking a more informed decision and placing those facts before the two parties. The investigation, as you perhaps know, is over. The process of hearing the parties' response on those various issues has just commenced. And since these are quasi-judicial proceedings, and we follow the whole process of natural justice, the process takes time.
CNBC TV 18, celebrating 16 years of business leadership.